Welcome, friend. Follow me. We're going somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous. Most people would never dare enter the place we are going. There's no telling what horrors we'll find, what terrors we'll uncover. Don't say I didn't warn you. We might discover terrible monsters lurking there. Be careful, they could follow you out, or maybe they're already inside you. Are you afraid? Good. Now you are ready to enter the Warning Woods. So, my name is Jimmy Shepherd. So, I was with my fiance, Izzy Gonzalez, the day we went looking for Miss Melinda. We were, honestly, we kind of just wanted to go viral. I mean, we obviously wanted to help, bring her home to her kids and stuff too, but I'm just being honest. The reason we brought the cameras and stuff is we wanted to get something out of it for ourselves too, I mean, it sounds like such a bad thing coming out of my mouth right now, but I think it's probably not that uncommon for people to think that way. I'll talk about Miss Melinda a little bit, but I'd actually never met her. I saw some posts, Actually, I think Izzy saw some posts about her going through the guardrail during that storm a few weeks ago. I didn't know that storm made it all the way up there. Down here by us, a couple of sheds and fences got flattened. A lot of trees came down, but other than the property damage, everyone came out of it okay. Shaken up, yeah, but okay. Up there, man. 5 dead, all those houses. And then on top of it, we hear this Miss Melinda's missing. God, it's just horrible. Horrible stuff. So I guess somebody saw her hit the guardrail and go over the ravine. They didn't know who it was at the time, but they called in some kind of dark-colored sedan driving off the road. They said it was too dangerous to stop and see if whoever was in the car was okay. The wind was blowing hard enough it could have pushed them through the broken barricade too. It wasn't till the next morning, late, that Melinda Torré's husband, Mr. Torré, sorry, I forget his name. I hear he worked with her at the library. Wasn't as well known around town, though. Anyway, he heard back from all of Melinda's family and friends that she hadn't stayed with any of them during the storm. That's when he got worried and called the cops and made all the posts about her being missing. The cops connected Miss Melinda's dark blue Chevy Malibu to the 911 call about the car going over the ravine during the storm. I guess they matched the tread marks or something like that, but other than those, every trace of Miss Melinda and her car was totally erased. After they couldn't find her for a couple of days, Izzy and I were like, this is crazy, how can't they find a whole car, So I was like, what if we went out and we actually found her? I'm thinking about the river and how crazy high it was after the storm, right? I'm thinking we're south of where she went over the ravine and she most likely went in the water. Like, it's not even a question to me if she went in or not. So I say to Izzy, let's go find her. And Izzy's like, she shrugs and she's like, okay. We started here and just worked our way up on foot. We looked at more than just the water since it had gone down quite a lot since the storm. And, I figured if her car got washed away, it might have been dropped off somewhere in the woods near the river. Izzy thought, what if she'd actually bailed on the car and got washed away herself? I mean, she could have gotten stuck up in a tree along the ravine for all we knew. We tried to cast a wide net, is what I'm trying to say. As maybe you already know, it turned out we could have stuck to the river. That's where we found it. Miss Melinda's blue Malibu. It was lodged upside down in the roots of this big tree that fell during the storm, or maybe after because of the flooding. The roots looked like a bunch of tentacles holding Miss Melinda's car there, waiting for somebody to find it. Izzy said it looked like the roots were trying to drown her, but see, I figured if Miss Melinda's car made it all the way down to where we found it, she'd probably drowned long before those roots caught her. But, I guess neither of us were right. I'm not really sure how to... I'll just tell you what we did next. So, we very carefully made our way out on this fallen tree, right? It was scary because it hadn't really settled in yet and kept bobbing up and down when we moved. But we crawled out to the end, and I volunteered to go under the water to see if, see if she was still there. We watched a lot of these amateur search and recovery videos on YouTube to prepare, so we brought some cheap snorkeling gear with us. It was basically just a couple of masks with rubber hoses attached to extend the snorkel a bit. Anyway, I put mine on and Izzy held the hose for me while I went underwater. Looking back, I'm lucky that section of the river wasn't flowing too fast because I totally could have gotten sucked under if it had been. I held onto the car, though, which helped me stay in place. What I didn't bring with me was a light. I didn't think about how dark it would be underwater, I guess. Plus, the way the sun was, that big tree that caught the car was casting a huge shadow right on top of it. Anyway, so I get down there and all I have to do is see whether Miss Melinda's body is still stuck in the car or not, right? Then we can either tell the authorities we found her or to keep looking. Even with it being pretty dark, I figured I'd be able to see a body through one of the windows if it was in there. It wasn't a huge car. So I sort of climb down the car until I'm at the back windows, and sure enough, there's some sunlight sort of cutting through under the fallen tree, and it's just enough to light up this long hair floating inside the car. I'm just damn, yep, that's her. She's still stuck in the car, and she drowned. Case closed, But then, this is where it gets crazy. So while I'm staring at her, I'm sort of frozen, because I've never seen a dead body before. It's a weird feeling. And I think I see her head move, right? But I'm thinking it's just the water moving her. My eyes had adjusted a bit so I could see her hands and stuff floating, but I don't know, there was just something different about the way her head moved. It jerked, like she suddenly realized I was there. It really freaked me out. But then I started thinking, holy cow, she's been alive this whole time and trapped, and maybe the car only recently flipped over and filled up, I'm thinking, this is nuts. This is like fate or something that we just happened to find her when she's got seconds to live. So I pop out of the water to tell Izzy, hey, we got to get this lady out of here. She's still alive. So without her mask on or anything, Izzy jumps in and we both start trying to open the doors. They're all locked though. We can see the locks through the windows. Oh, right. Izzy grabbed a flashlight before she jumped in because I told her it was dark down there. So anyway, she's got this light and she's looking around and we can see the doors are locked, but we can't talk to Melinda because we're underwater, right? So we're just knocking on the glass and pointing at the locks, hoping she gets the message. But then she just looks at us. Just looks at both of us with this really blank expression on her face. I'll never forget her eyes, I can swear that. I mean, her skin was all puffy and discolored and veiny, but it's her eyes that really stuck out to me. They were super bloodshot, red. And her pupils had shrunk to these tiny dots, which doesn't make any sense since your pupils get bigger in the dark, right? So that gets me thinking oh, she's got a concussion, which is why she's not thinking she has to unlock the car to get out. But then she, looks at Izzy's finger and sees the lock, and she sort of slowly pulls on it to open it. And we're great, let's get this door open. But the pressure from all the water is just too much. And the door just, it's not gonna open. At this point, Izzy and I, we're both out of breath, so we have to surface for a second. I barely took a breath when I felt this sucking right under my feet. Then I felt a hand grab me around the ankle and yank me back under. My mask came off my face, but I kept my eyes open because while I was just freaking out, I was already pretty freaked out by finding Miss Melinda, and when she pulled me down, I just started panicking. She got both hands around my leg and kind of climbed over me like she was using me as a ladder to get up to the surface. I don't know how she got the door open. I mean, Izzy and I couldn't get it open together, right? How? But somehow she'd gotten out and she got her hands up to my shoulders and shoved me down, but we were just spinning in the water then. I wasn't holding anything, so when she tried to climb up, it just pushed us both down. I could hear Izzy screaming up above, but that's something I just remembered later because in the moment, I was just like, I gotta get away from this lady or I'm gonna drown. I was already totally out of air. I was doing that gulping thing just to try to keep my mouth shut because my body wanted to inhale so bad. Last thing I remember, the back of my neck hit something hard, and I guess it must have been Melinda's car because it felt like metal. Next thing I know, I'm laying in mud on the bank, and Izzy's crying and slamming into my chest with her fists. I still couldn't breathe, though, which was almost scarier than getting drowned by a dead lady. I was thinking I was just going to die all over again, but then Izzy slammed my chest again, and I got this feeling like I was going to puke and turned my head, and a bunch of water just started pouring out of me. I'd seen that happen in movies like 100 times, but I never expected it to burn so bad, even after I got most of the water out. I couldn't talk, not like they do in the movies. I mean, I was glad to be alive and all, but I still felt like death. I started looking around and gasping for air and everything, and Izzy must have read my mind because she said she's not here anymore, talking about Miss Melinda. She said she ran off into the woods. And I'm laying there thinking there's no way Miss Melinda didn't get a bunch of water in her lungs too, and how there's no way in hell I could just get up and run away feeling like that. No way. It would have been physically impossible. I was just, there was just no way. Hey everybody, this is Todd Morehouse, the guy with the security camera footage. If you've been following the Melissa TORRÉ case, you know what I'm talking about. I told all this to the police already, but I've got a lot of people asking about it, so I'll just lay it all out here before I hopefully get to move on with my life. A few days after the storm, I woke up and saw a notification on my phone from 3-something in the morning that said my security camera out back had detected motion. Now that's not too unusual. I keep the motion sensitivity pretty high since I've got the pool back there. Sometimes I get geese and whatever else landing back there and I have to go shoo them away. I'm only bringing that up to explain why I didn't check the recording right away. I just rolled out of bed and went to the kitchen to start the coffee like always. I make a habit of not looking at my phone too much in the early morning, so it wasn't until after I'd finished my coffee that I picked it up again. It was curiosity's turn at the wheel now that my brain was fully functional. I tapped the notification, which opened the app. It opened on the live view by default and gave me a look at the pool. The water was moving in a way I didn't like. Something about the way it subtly lapped against the walls made me pretty wary. I felt like a mouse hearing the swoop of wings. I watched the feed for a few minutes before deciding the water wasn't going to quit moving anytime soon. I concentrated on my feet, trying to sense an earthquake. That's how much the water was moving. I thought the ground must have been shaking. I could have gone out back and looked into the pool to see what was going on, but I felt safe inside. I didn't know why I needed to feel safe, but I did. I was like that mouse again, curled up in my hole, listening to a hawk circling above. I felt like as long as I didn't expose myself to its talons, I'd live to see another day. I wondered if the recorded incident from the wee hours would explain the convulsing water. I hit play and the recording began with something large falling into one of the bushes along my fence. A bear, I thought. It was too big to be any cat other than a mountain lion, but I didn't think a mountain lion would be so clumsy. I kept watching. I immediately recognized Miss Melinda from the news when she stood up next to my bush. Her clothes were hanging on by threads and her hair stuck to her skin, which looked really puffy and dark like a whole body bruise. As her knees straightened, our eyes met. The hours separating us created no barrier, it seemed. The recording wasn't very high quality. Obviously, it hadn't been digitally enhanced yet, but even in the distorted footage, I could tell something was wrong with her eyes. Her pupils had shrunk to a nearly undetectable size, and her irises had paled nearly into invisibility. She must have stood like that for long enough that the camera quit recording. A separate recording, time-stamped 3 minutes later, started playing automatically. It began with Melinda 2 steps from the edge of the pool. My eyes flashed in the direction of the pool, even though from the kitchen there was nowhere I could see it. When they returned to the screen, Melinda was crouching by the water. She cupped her hands in the water, and for a second I thought she was going to take a drink. I started thinking, how could I be scared of this poor woman? How long has she been wandering around like that, maybe still dazed from her accident? I remembered her dilated eyes. She splashed the water on top of her head instead of drinking it, though, which looked odd. She was already soaking wet. Most of the water she dumped on herself trickled off her legs and ran down her already saturated hair and clothes. She was trying to cool herself off, I thought. We were creeping into autumn, obviously. I was just behind in getting the pool drained. What I mean to say is, Melinda should have been freezing cold already, being so wet out there in the chilly night. While she doused herself with more rapid-fire handfuls of water, Melinda eventually tipped forward and fell into the pool. I no longer felt any fear for myself, but I was scared for her. I rushed out to the pool believing I'd just witnessed the real reason for the lapping water. Movement meant life. There was still time to get her out, I hoped. That brings me to the last part of the video everybody's seen, the last recording of Miss Melinda on my security camera. You can watch me run out there ready to dive in and rescue her. She was wriggling like a starfish. That's what I remember when I saw her at the bottom of the pool, face down over the drain. I don't even remember jumping. All of a sudden, I was mid-dive and already kicking to go pull Miss Melinda free. The video doesn't show what happened underwater, but there isn't much to tell. As soon as I reached her, she pulled away. Her hair and clothes weren't caught in the drain after all. Suddenly, I felt like that mouse again, caught outside my hole with a shadow growing over me. It was her eyes. They didn't look human. I swam the opposite direction, emerging on the shallow end, and basically jumped out of the pool. I turned to push Miss Melinda. I don't even want to call her that. Pushed her down to get away, but she'd gotten out on the other side. I didn't have to worry about her coming after me either. She was already straddling the fence and slipping over it. She left nothing but a creeping splotch of water on the wood. And, the rest is history. Keith and I always took forever to close the restaurant when we were scheduled together because we always messed with each other with pranks and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, I'm Lemaire Daniel, one of the guys from the Pizza Hut. Those guys, yeah. What happened is I was supposed to be closing the kitchen, my job, and Keith was out front with the registers and all that, his job. He also had to close down the salad bar because even though most Pizza Huts, maybe all of them actually, got rid of their buffets, ours still had the salad bar. Basically, nobody ever ate off it, but we kept it stocked just in case. Okay, so I was out talking to Keith by the registers because I'd gotten ahead on all my stuff. I wasn't totally done yet, but close enough to slow down a bit. Enough to chill for a bit. I had some dishes soaking in hot water, but I had to wait for the dishwasher to finish its cycle to do anything with them. I guess he was a little bit behind, so Keith asked me to go grab the salad bar cart for him. He was probably just asking for a hand since I was standing around talking, but right away I figured he was trying to pull something. I was thinking, oh, he's going to lock me in the cooler since that's where we kept the salad cart. I went in the cooler and opened the door and stepped inside, and the whole time I'm listening for Keith to come up behind me. We turned the light off on each other in there all the time. It's like the most basic prank, but it's annoying as hell to try to get out without tripping on the plastic hanging off the dough racks and stuff. It's really cramped in there, especially with the salad cart inside. I let the door shut behind me and got ready to push it back open the second the light turned off, but after a few seconds, it was pretty obvious Keith wasn't pulling off our usual prank. That's when I heard a thud through the wall. It sounded like it came from the walk-in freezer right next to the cooler. That was weird because I hadn't heard Keith open the freezer door, and it usually made this super obvious groaning noise like it needed oil or something. Sometimes ice buildup would shatter and crack when you opened it too, so I was thinking, how did I miss him going in there? I figured he was about to text me saying he needed something from the freezer too, so he could just jump out at me when I opened the door, so I tried to beat him to the punch. I quietly left the cooler and snuck to the freezer door. By the way, it's really dumb to let one of those freezers shut on you because there's a ton of stories about them locking with somebody inside and that person freezing to death. But I just figured Keith was goofing off and not thinking about stuff like that. He obviously knew I wouldn't just close down and leave without figuring out where he was first. I opened the freezer door and I let out the craziest scream you've ever heard. It felt like it came from my nuts. I'm not kidding. Sorry, it did. It was like they shot up into my stomach and pushed all the air out of my lungs, and then I just started laughing. I couldn't believe Keith took our prank war that far. I mean, this was high-level stuff. Keith wasn't in the freezer. He was still out front counting tips or whatever. He came running in after I screamed with this just absolutely terrified look on his face, which just made me laugh even harder. I was thinking he scared me so bad, I scared him back. I asked him, "Where'd you get this thing, Spirit?" We get a Spirit Halloween store in the mall every year, and it had just opened a couple weeks earlier. But he looks at me and he says, "Dude, what are you talking about? Why'd you scream like that?" And I can see on his face, he thinks I'm trying to prank him now. And that freaked me out because if he didn't put her there, why was there a life-sized woman standing at the back of the walk-in freezer with frost all over her bruised skin and her hair frozen, sticking out all crazy around her head? Nowhere in my mind did I think she could be real. Nowhere. She had these crazy eyes like I'd never seen on anybody before. They were like zombie eyes, wide open but with nothing behind them and just staring straight ahead at nothing. I shut the door part way and waved him over to see, still thinking maybe he's just acting really well and he's still going to try to scare me. But I opened the door and showed him the woman, and he just slammed it and said, "I'm calling 911, stay here." Then he just ran out of the kitchen. I didn't know what to do. I was too scared of the woman in the freezer to touch her or even get close enough to figure out if she was alive. The fact that she was standing up made her look alive, mostly. But if she'd been in there long enough for her hair to freeze solid, I didn't understand how she could be. I figured I had to do something instead of just standing there waiting. I went into dry storage and found the breaker box for the kitchen. Most of the labels were faded or smudged with grease, but I figured out which breaker controlled the freezer and shut it off. I didn't realize the freezer even made sound, but when I flipped the breaker, I heard it stop humming. Then I went back to the freezer door. It was probably around then that Keith walked back in talking to a dispatcher on his phone. He saw me about to open the door and shook his head like he didn't think it was a good idea, but I ignored him. I just wanted to open the door to let the hot air from the kitchen into the freezer and start thawing the lady out. She hadn't moved at all. She was still just standing at the back, staring out the door at nothing in particular with her creepy chameleon eyes. Keith came over and held the door open and started describing the lady to the dispatcher. And this is probably going to sound weird, but I heard the dishwasher stop running and just walked away to deal with that. It wasn't far from the freezer, so it's not like I just left Keith there alone, but I knew if I still wanted to get done in time, I needed to send the next load through. I was just acting on autopilot. I acted like the dishwasher's dinging paused time for a second. Hot steam always poured out of the dishwasher in huge clouds if you opened it right away, and usually I stepped back to let it all out, but that night I just shoved the clean dish rack through to the other side to start drying and let that hot steam soak me. Then I loaded up the next rack and sent it through. I kept an eye on the frozen lady the whole time. Since cutting the power to the freezer also killed the light, she was pretty hard to see, but I thought it looked like she was thawing out. There was definitely less frost on her swollen face for sure. Some of the dishes in the sink still didn't fit on the rack, so I started refilling the sink with steaming hot water to soak the ones that were left. Then I heard Keith yell my name in a way that made me feel scared right away. It was like he was calling me back to him, but also warning me to stay away at the same time. Obviously, I went back to him, and that's when we both saw the frozen lady move. It was just her fingers at first. She spread them out, then curled them into fists, then spread them out again. Then her whole body kind of slouched and made this horrible cracking sound before she bent her neck and turned her head. Even though her eyes were open the whole time, she looked at us like she'd just woken up. I saw now that they weren't covered with frost. Her eyes had small black dots in the middle, and they were pointed right at Keith. I said, "Can you hear me?" to the lady, and her eyes flicked over to me. It was awful. She looked at me like she wanted to hurt me, but she also looked scared. Keith told her we were trying to help her, and her eyes went back to him. The freezer popped really loud all of a sudden, probably because the temperature was dropping so quickly with the door open, and that made her jump. Just like that, any chance we had of talking to her ended. She opened her mouth like she was trying to scream, but nothing came out. She just ran straight at us. Keith tried to slam the door, I guess out of instinct, just trying to stop her, but she slammed into it and knocked him over. I grabbed a cutting board off the counter behind me since it was the only thing in reach and held it up to shield myself. The back door was right behind me and I could have just run, but I didn't want to leave Keith behind with her. I figured she was on drugs or something pretty strong. Who knew what she was going to do, what she was capable of doing? She grabbed onto the cutting board and I thought she was trying to rip it out of my hands to get to me, so I held on super tight and kind of wrestled with her for a while. We started turning and eventually she ended up between me and the dishwasher. Since there was a big gap behind her now, I shoved really hard with the cutting board. She tripped over one of the floor mats and fell backward. I heard her hit the dishwasher, the way it rang out super loud. I figured she probably hit her head on it. I couldn't see because I still had the board up to protect my face. I heard Keith yell and he pushed past me. I lowered the board and saw that, yeah, she'd hit her head pretty good. She had blood running down her neck. I was just kind of stunned seeing that. Keith crouched down next to her and started yelling at me to help him. I'm pretty sure I blacked out for a few seconds before that. I think he thought I'd killed her. Her eyes were still open, super bloodshot. I mean, I don't think she blinked this whole time, but she had that distant look again like she wasn't actually looking at anything. Then, out of nowhere, she grabbed Keith's shirt and pulled him in like she was going to bite him. And again, I'm not trying to sound completely insane here, but I have to be honest, I saw this black thing hanging in the back of her throat like a worm dangling from the top of her mouth. I only saw it for a second, but I'm 100% sure I saw it, I swear. I jumped in and pulled Keith away, but the lady stood up and grabbed me next. I just panicked, basically, and not even knowing what I was doing, I grabbed her hair and... Look, I was really scared, okay? I grabbed her hair and shoved her head into the sink that I just refilled. It was still steaming. I held her head in the water, and Keith didn't stop me. He just started yelling about what was happening to the dispatcher and begging the cops to hurry up. I could feel the water burning my hands. I remember imagining what it must have felt like on that lady's half-frozen face. All of a sudden, the lady went stiff. Not like she stopped moving, more like she'd just been electrocuted or something. And that's when I felt something touch my hand underwater. It felt like worms crawling up my wrist. I let go and ripped my hand out of the water. This black thing that looked like a starfish made of liver was stuck to my hand. I flailed my arm to get it off, but it was stuck to me and still crawling up. It got to my elbow before I just slammed my arm against the wall. That didn't work either. Keith was probably thinking better than me at that point. To me, everything was just a blur surrounding this alien thing crawling up my arm. Keith opened the dishwasher and pulled the half-clean rack of dishes out. Then he yelled, "Put it in here." I stuck my arm in the dishwasher and Keith used a dirty fork to pry the thing off me. It gave up pretty easily after he started poking it, and I pulled my arm right out before he slammed the dishwasher shut, which automatically started the cycle. I don't know if you know much about restaurant-grade dishwashers, but they run hot, real hot, in order to sanitize the dishes. The lady had just slumped over by the sink. Now her eyes were closed and I was pretty sure she was dead. We didn't touch her. We both had our hands on the dishwasher doors to hold it shut until the cops showed up. When they showed up, the cops just wanted to focus on the lady. Apparently, they recognized her because she'd been missing for days. They tried CPR but couldn't wake her up. When the paramedics showed up and took over, the cops tried to pull us out of the kitchen to talk to us, but we told them we couldn't leave the dishwasher. I could tell they didn't believe us about the black alien thing we had trapped in there, but I was too scared to open it to show them. Eventually, right after the dishwasher stopped, the cops forced us to step aside so they could see inside it. I thought that the thing was going to jump out at one of them like the facehuggers in Alien. That thing had been inside the lady. I knew it. In her brain. Controlling her. The officer that opened the dishwasher looked inside for a few seconds, and nothing happened. Then he asked me, "Is this what attacked you?" It sounded like he was holding back a laugh. Remember how I said that thing looked like it was made of liver? Well, now it looked even more like liver, chopped into little pieces by the sprayers. The pieces weren't moving at all, which was kind of a relief, but I also realized it looked even more like I'd just drowned some lady for no reason. Later on, after her autopsy cleared us, they let us go and dropped the charges, but I still feel sort of guilty. Maybe somebody could have saved her if I didn't shove her head into that sink, but I don't know. I just don't know. My name is Dr. Vito Mignon. I performed the autopsy of Melinda TORRÉ. They told me I was looking for signs of drowning, which made perfect sense to me. She'd gone into the river in her car and had been found trapped there. Then someone found her at the bottom of their pool, and finally 2 Pizza Hut employees shoved her head into a sink full of hot water. I still performed a complete examination, and yes, she had water in her lungs and showed other signs of oxygen depletion, but her internal organs looked like they'd quit functioning possibly even a week prior to her death. In my professional opinion, Melinda TORRÉ died the night of the storm when she drove off the road. So how, then, did she travel all those miles south and attack 3 people? I found the answer, if you can call it that, in her brain. I want you to picture a puppet. Nothing fancy, just the simple type someone sticks their hand in. How their fingers control each limb. Now, obviously, a human brain is a very complex organ, much more complex than a puppet, but Melinda's had been, to put it simply, hollowed out in a similar way. Certain connections had been severed, particularly those connections which controlled her limbs, head, eyes, and mouth. I researched parasites, particularly after I read the police report and what the Pizza Hut employees said about a creature coming out of Melinda's head when placed in hot water. I found nothing which would do the particular type of damage I observed to her brain, but in my professional opinion, I believe those boys may have been telling the truth. Forgive me for speculating, but without the creature in question available to examine, I am left with the sparse evidence available to me from which to form any sort of opinion. It is possible Melinda TORRÉ was afflicted by some new parasite which has never been observed before, something which desires or requires water and cold temperatures to survive. This would explain its pursuit of water and Melinda's eventual discovery in the freezer. Once it was introduced to the high temperature of the water in the sink, it evacuated her brain in order to escape the heat. If the boys are to be believed and the creature was destroyed inside the dishwasher, This might explain its aversion to heat. In high temperatures, it was vulnerable. It could not survive. I'm sharing this in hopes that any other patients who display similar symptoms to Melinda Torré might be treated in time to save them, although by the time the parasite is introduced to the brain, it may already be too late. Only more subjects to study will help us confirm treatment modalities and viability. For this reason, I pray this mystery forever remains unsolved. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For early, ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes I call Into the Woods, become a patron at patreon.com/thewarningwoods. You can also support the show by purchasing merch. The merch store and Patreon links are in this episode's description. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Warning Woods. And when you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.